Hello there. So for this next installment in the Archetype series, we're going to be moving on to another archetype whose influence rests at the very center of all human innovation and insight. And I'm going to reiterate now that the key element of these treatments on the archetypes is to highlight their respective characteristics and map them appropriately onto the patterns of human action that are generated by them. Archetypes are not images. Archetypes are not words. They are a part of what constitutes the building blocks of the human psyche, and their patterns inform the images and the narratives and the styles of action that emerge in conformity with that original archetypal system in the mind. So we could say that an archetype is the skeleton that we don't see, and the active end result is the flesh and skin that embodies its outer expression. There's also a very seductive danger that we have to be careful about here, and that is the impulse to begin glamorizing the archetypes as some kind of supernatural agency. And I say this because Carl Jung's work has been the subject of a certain new ageification in the years following his death, and the reason for that is because it's been appropriated by a lot of younger, enthusiastic and creative people. And those people have typically done what young, enthusiastic and creative people do, which is they find something that they're passionate about, that it stimulates them, and then they begin the process of subjectively redefining it in their own terms and applying their own creative spin on it. And that always works out to the detriment of a subject's original integrity. So as a reasonably young and creative individual, I have to be very careful about how I relay this kind of information across to you so that we don't make the same mistakes here. Inquiry should always court clarity, not end up adding further layers of obfuscation over an already enigmatic subject like the human mind. So, with that in mind then, let's continue on and say something about the magician archetype. What associations come into focus when we hear the word magician? We might think of a romantic character, such as a sorcerer or a warlock type, heavily robed, and someone who possesses a special insight into matters that are beyond the spectrum of most people's everyday thinking. This is true because the magician does possess a keener insight into the workings of the world that many others seem to lack. However, the aspects of the human system that this archetype originally speaks to is inherent within all human beings as a part of their evolutionary heritage. That heritage and function being the ability to read into systems and translate that understanding into a technological asset. Man is an organism defined by his tools, and these tools were all brought about by an ability to peer into the secrets of nature and convert its skin into the manifold instruments that have likewise defined our culture and civilization. In the culture, the magician is typically portrayed as something of an outsider figure, in the sense that they are individuals who walk on the borderlands between the familiar world and the world of unknown variables. The magician is an interfacer between the world of forms and the place where the forms emerge. This otherworldly side to the magician that's often portrayed in lore and in the fantastical regions of popular culture, this aloofness or dreamlike quality to his nature is directly symbolizing this aspect, that of having one foot planted in the world of matter and the other in the world of ideas. In mythology, figures such as Thoth, Hermes, Odin, and Merlin are all expressions of this evolutionary ability to decipher knowledge from complex systems and pass those insights on for the benefit of other parties. It's for this reason why the magician often comes as a guide, an advisor to the king, a teller of omens, an innovator, an artisan, a scientist, and through his translations, both a creator and a destroyer of worlds. Any function that clearly necessitates a strong ability to observe, introspect, systemize, and convert material is accessing the powers of the magician archetype. So now that we have that down, what more can we say about the origins of this archetypal feature that will help us to contextualize it within our own lives? Well, I did say that the magician archetype is associated to our evolutionary ability because it is speaking to that part of our function that intermediates between the world of external forms and the internal world of the mind. So we are always commuting between these two worlds all of the time, and it speaks to the brain's ability to be able to creatively convert information that it has received from the outside world into new solutions of intelligent invention and creative communication that's essential to the archetype of the magician. That power is essential to the archetype of the magician that's inherent inside our minds. The magician, in this sense, the word magician, I should say, in this sense, is simply a creative way of symbolizing the innate intelligent processes that we rely on to make sense of and use parts of the world to our own advantage. Interpretation, translation, communication, innovation, all these things are core aspects of the magician, and they are the instruments of our ability to be able to read into the many languages of our sensory experience. So let's look at a few examples of that. We could say that a psychotherapist who can listen to the language of a patient, read their body language and micro expressions, and harness the impressions that come from those signals into an intelligent solution that helps that individual gain clarity over a problem that they were having trouble with, that psychotherapist is accessing the magician archetype to do that. How many times have you been called upon by a friend, or you yourself have called upon the aid of somebody else who you know possesses a certain insight, or simply whose insights you trust, to help you with a particular problem that you're having? This person may have demonstrated a certain keenness in the ability to understand human nature and read people effectively. And you might be unsure about a certain person in your life. Maybe you're going to enter into a relationship with somebody and you want to ask your friend what you think, what they think of them. You want to basically pry their mind. You want to pry their expertise and their experience into reading into people, to gain some clarity for yourself. That is, in essence, trying to access the magician in that person. Or if somebody is coming to you for that advice, they are trying to access that in you. Again, we could evidence a specialist such as an engineer who inquires into a technological system, conceives of that system internally, and intuitively exposes a way to make that system more efficient and cost-effective for a business. He is harnessing the magician in him to achieve that innovation within a technological system. And the magician archetype obviously arises in the artist's studio. If we think of the blank page, or the mold of clay, or even the musical instrument as representing an intermediary point between the two worlds, where the artist draws upon the impressions of an entire life and translates that space or that form into a new construct that will serve as a communication of that mind's lived experiences and contribute to the life of a cultural system. All of these are various specialized examples of where the magician's influence can be felt. But I have to reiterate again that this influence, this effect, is not exclusive to these specialized roles like the psychotherapist or the artist. Rather, the magician is inside all of us as part of our evolutionary heritage, and these are but specific highlights of where it can present itself. Everybody commutes between the two worlds. Everybody has some ability to decipher clarity from systems. And everybody has done something in their lives that has been brought about through an ability to interpret, translate, and modify a problem into a new solution. You probably do this every day in your job, and many times as well in your own personal interactions. Don't allow the elaborate and exotic skins that the archetypes come in to obfuscate the underlying processes that they are predicated upon. These things are a part of all of us. They are a part of our evolutionary and psychological makeup. And when we think of it, speaking about these psychological functions in terms of archetypes is actually speaking to the very nature of the magician archetype that we've been discussing today, because archetypes are simply a visual way of talking about systems and patterns of our psyche. And it's that ability to be able to access and creatively translate those patterns into an imagistic representation that is a part of the power of what we could symbolically call the magician. So then, that's what I wanted to say today on the subject of the magician archetype. Very interesting one to look out for. The magician is all over pop culture references, comes up quite a lot. But we have to start, if we're interested in Jungian psychology and we're interested in learning about archetypes, we have to try and divorce ourselves from the romance and the exotic nature of these things in the way that they present themselves, and actually be able to map them onto the patterns of our own experiences and actions as they arise in the human mind, because that's their origin. All of these things haven't just emerged out of a vacuum. They are creative and visual ways of symbolic ways, truly symbolic ways of talking about patterns of action, patterns of influence that exist within our organism. So then, that was my little dissertation on the magician archetype. I hope you've really enjoyed this. I've enjoyed making it. I love this archetype. And as usual, I'll see you again.